Whether you're a buyer or a seller in a supply chain or a single transaction, you'll have working capital tied up in the finance of your trade. If you're a seller, you're probably providing your customer with payment terms in addition to the goods and services you supply. You're not actually in the banking business, but you're definitely lending your customer money that will be better used to grow your own business. Your ability to provide supplier credit to your customers could be a limiting factor to the growth of your company, or even to retaining your customer's business. And it gets worse. You might be using the value of your unpaid invoices to borrow money from your own bank or other high-cost commercial finance working capital solution. Your business would be a lot more efficient if you received payment on acceptance of your goods or services and you had no liability for the funding of your customer's inventory at all. A working capital dream, I hear you say. Well, take a look at this. As a buyer in a supply chain, you may be looking for much-needed extended payment terms from your seller to grow your business without compromising your existing banking relationships. You may even want to improve a valuable supplier's cash flow without affecting your own. In the conventional model, both buyer and seller have a funding problem. Sellers have to provide their own working capital for the goods and services they're supplying until the buyer pays for them. And buyers have to provide the working capital required until they, in turn, get paid by their end purchasers. TradeRiver Steps is an online supply chain finance system which provides secure business funding into the supply chain by lending to trade buyers and providing accelerated non-recourse cash payments to trade sellers. Steps has no seller credit checks and requires no security from buyer or seller, so existing credit arrangements are unaffected by Steps. Buyers are provided with a trade credit limit, rather like a credit card, in many cases removing the need for working capital altogether. And sellers are provided with the source of accelerated non-recourse finance immediately when the buyer accepts the goods or services. By separating the goods from the obligation to pay and ensuring the risk, TradeRiver are able to inject unsecured cash into trade transactions at the point of acceptance of the goods or services by the buyer. This means that as a seller you can receive payment on a non-recourse basis directly from TradeRiver with no further cost or liability. And a buyer can get up to 120 days credit from TradeRiver to give them time to add value, ship and get paid by their customer. The transaction execution process is standardised and is completely transparent, and the seller's existing borrowing arrangements are unaffected because for the seller it's a balance sheet neutral cash sale. And if you enrol as both a Steps buyer and seller, you can have your inventory funded all the time. No letters of credit, no guarantees, no credit confirmations, no bank loans. Steps transaction costs are low and the process is simple, secure and efficient. To fund a transaction, both buyer and seller register online using the Steps portal and enrol, much in the same way as opening a bank account. There are no setup, registration or non-utilisation fees, and there's no security required from either buyer or seller. Once enrolled, buyer and seller are able to trade with each other and any other Steps user throughout the world. The buyer is provided with a credit limit that can be used with any other Steps seller. And the buyer and the seller are each provided with secure USB signature keys to ensure that every stage of every transaction is securely completed, verified and recorded. The buyer and the seller build their paperless transaction on screen. The buyer can choose any credit period up to 120 days for any value up to the buyer's credit limit. The buyer and the seller can make adjustments to the deal at any time until both parties are happy with the transaction. TradeRiver then approves the transaction online and the seller dispatches the goods or carries out the services to create an active transaction. At the point of delivery, any agreed adjustments are then made to the payment to correct for damage, disputed or otherwise contentious issues. Once agreed, the buyer accepts both the goods and their obligation to pay for them within the buyer's selected credit period. The exchange of goods-related documentation such as bills of lading, etc. can continue as normal through the Steps portal if required. The seller is then paid 100% of the transaction value less the all-inclusive Steps transaction cost immediately on a non-recourse basis. At any time until the end of the buyer's credit period, the buyer pays TradeRiver the transaction value and the buyer's credit limit is topped up again, just like a credit card ready for the next transaction. By using steps, buyer and seller can each reduce their supply chain working capital requirement to zero. Click here to register on the STEP system and we'll aim to get you enrolled right away, or contact us direct to discuss the trade finance solution for your business.